The orbital bombardment lasted precisely 6 hours. The hegemony military, efficient in all things, had calculated this was the optimal duration to break planetary resistance while preserving infrastructure. Their weapons, sleek antimatter missiles guided by artificial intelligences, struck with surgical precision, vaporizing government buildings, military installations, and communication hubs across Earth's surface. From their command ships, hegemony officers watched dispassionately as fireballs consumed Beijing, New York, Moscow, and 34 other major cities. Population centers chosen specifically to maximize psychological impact. Commander Zix Val stood apart from his celebrating colleagues on the bridge of the dreadnought *, inevitable conquest *. His elongated fingers, evolved for the delicate preservation of historical records, tapped nervously against the console as he studied the live feeds. Something wasn't right. The humans weren't responding according to the psychological models. "General Krav Moore," he said, addressing the hegemony's military commander, "I'm detecting irregular patterns in the human response." The general, a hulking reptilian whose species had conquered 3 systems before joining the hegemony, barely glanced at Zix Val's display. "Irregular how, archivist? Their military capacity is reduced by 78%. Their global communication network is fragmented. Victory parameters are being met. Zix Val magnify a sector of ruined Chicago. Look there. And there." He highlighted multiple areas where humans were moving with unexpected coordination. They're organizing rescue operations, not fleeing the impact zones, moving toward them. Primitive instinct, Krav Moore dismissed. Some species rush toward danger rather than away. It changes nothing. But as landing craft deployed toward Earth's surface 22 hours later, Zix Val's concerns proved prescient. The first wave of occupation forces, expecting minimal resistance, transmitted confused reports back to the command ship. Locals using civilian transports as barricades, repurposed industrial equipment as weapons, request immediate air support at coordinates. Zix Val watched the tactical display as dozens of hegemony landing sites went dark. In the outskirts of what had been Chicago, a particularly disturbing transmission came through. The commander enhanced the audio, drawing General Krav Moore's attention. "They're not retreating," came the panicked voice of Ground Commander Vexler. "We've neutralized hundreds, but they keep coming, using their own dead as cover to advance." Weapons fire interrupted the transmission. Most unsettling is their facial expression. "They're smiling as they kill us. Request immediate evacuation." The transmission cut to static. General Krav Moore's scales darkened with blood flow, the equivalent of a human pallor. "This resistance is temporary," he insisted, though his tone lacked conviction. "Once the orbital platforms are established." "General," Zix Val interrupted, displaying a new feed. "The humans are broadcasting." On screens throughout the command ship, a human female appeared. Her face was streaked with blood and soot, one arm improvised in a sling. Behind her, other humans worked feverishly to rescue survivors from a collapsed building. Her voice, translated by hegemony systems, was unnervingly calm. "People of Earth, this is Captain Rebecca Winters broadcasting from what remains of Atlanta. We are under attack by an alien force. They struck without warning, without provocation. Remember this day. Remember what they did." She looked directly into the camera, as if she could see the hegemony commanders watching. "And remember what we now promise them. We will endure. We will recover. And they will regret this decision for as long as their species exists." Zix Val felt an unfamiliar sensation spread through his body. The biological reaction, his species evolved instead of fear. He turned to General Krav Moore, who was ordering a second wave of bombardment. "General," he said quietly, "I believe we have made a grave miscalculation. The strategic analysis failed to account for something fundamental about humans." "What's that, archivist?" the general growled, irritated by the interruption. "When we attack most species, they either surrender or fight until they cannot. Humans. Zixval gestured to a new transmission showing humans converting a shopping mall into a fortified hospital. Humans transform. The humans we attack no longer exist. We have created something new, something dangerous. The general dismissed him with a gesture. Deploy the second wave. Double the antimatter yield. As Zixval returned to his station, he made a personal entry in the archival record, something few of his species had done in centuries. I fear we have not conquered a primitive world today, he recorded quietly. I fear we have awakened something that will never stop until we pay for what we've done. May the future forgive our arrogance. 3 years into what the hegemony had planned as a 6-week pacification turned the alien coalition's certainty to bewilderment. Their occupation forces rotated on 3-month deployments. The maximum duration their psychologists determined troops could endure constant human resistance without suffering mental breakdown. Commander Zixval studied footage from a hidden observation post near the ruins of Shanghai. Colonel Sarah Chen moved through the underground complex with quiet authority, her scared face illuminated by holographic displays, tracking hegemony movements. 3 years ago, she had been a university mathematics professor. Now, she commanded the most effective resistance cell in Asia. The new hegemony commander arrives tomorrow, Chen told her officers, pointing to transport routes on the display. Their rotation gives us an opportunity. They never learn, but we always remember. Zixval's translation implant caught the murmurs of agreement. Asterisk, they never learn, but we always remember. Asterisk, the phrase appeared consistently across intercepted communications. At first, he had classified it as merely inspirational rhetoric, but increasingly, he suspected it revealed something fundamental about human psychology. In his private research chamber aboard the command ship, Zixval compiled his findings. Unlike the warriors and administrators who saw only military objectives, his archivist heritage drove him to understand. He organized his data meticulously. Asterisk Exhibit 14. Human Educational Adaptation Asterisk. The footage showed a classroom formed in what had once been a subway station. Children between approximately 8 to 12 standard years sat attentively while an instructor displayed holographic schematics of hegemony battle cruisers. The thermal exhaust regulation system remains their most vulnerable point, the teacher explained, highlighting the section. Their engineers never adapted the design after the Battle of Sydney because their military doctrine prioritizes offensive capability over defensive adaptation. The children took notes with intense concentration. One raised a hand. Yes, Mirai. The teacher acknowledged. Is it true they don't remember their mistakes? My mother says that's why we study history so carefully, because they can't. The teacher nodded solemnly. The hegemony species evolved to process traumatic experiences differently. They physiologically forget pain and failure as a survival mechanism. It served them well on their evolutionary path, but now it's their greatest weakness against us. Zixval paused the footage, disturbed. The humans were correct. Hegemony military doctrine focused on overwhelming force rather than adaptive strategy because their species naturally dismissed past failures. Their educational systems emphasized future planning, not historical analysis. He switched to more recent footage. Colonel Chen stood before new recruits, her ritual unchanged over 3 years. The room darkened as she activated a holographic display showing Earth before the attack, gleaming cities, natural wonders, smiling families. This is what we lost, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of personal tragedy. This is what they took from us. The display shifted to the aftermath, cratered cities, mass graves, children with radiation burns. And this is why we fight. Finally, she showed images of the dead, cascading faces of those lost in the initial bombardment, including her own family. Remember their faces, she told the silent recruits. Remember that the hegemony did this, and remember what we promised the dead. The recruits responded in unison. We will make them regret it forever. Zixval closed the file and prepared his report for the increasingly desperate Hegemony Council. Their latest strategy involved deploying new commanders with no knowledge of previous failed tactics, believing fresh perspectives would counter human resistance. They failed to understand that while each hegemony commander started from zero, humans accumulated knowledge with each encounter. When he presented his findings, General Cravmore dismissed his concerns with the same arrogance that had characterized the initial invasion. Their emotional reactions make them predictable, the general insisted. Their attachment to the past is primitive. Our forces adapt based on future objectives, not historical grievances. No, Zixval responded, his voice carrying the weight of his species' role as keepers of history. It makes them patient. While we forget and repeat our mistakes, they remember and ensure we never make the same mistake twice. He added one final observation to his report that evening. The hegemony measures this conflict in deployment cycles. The humans measure it in generations. They are not simply fighting a war. They are writing a history that ends with our defeat. The hegemony's technological superiority had been their one constant comfort through 8 years of grinding conflict. Even as human resistance intensified, they maintained absolute confidence in their defensive systems. Shields based on quantum field manipulation developed over centuries of scientific advancement. No primitive species could possibly understand such technology, let alone counter it, until suddenly they did. Commander Zixval reviewed the battlefield footage with growing unease. A hegemony outpost in what had once been northern Canada had gone silent after reporting the human advance. The recovery team's cameras showed the aftermath. Hegemony soldiers dead inside their shield perimeter, killed by crude projectile weapons that had somehow penetrated defenses designed to repel energy weapons thousands of times more powerful. Impossible, muttered Science Officer Kelvera beside him. Those are primitive kinetic weapons, barely more than metal propelled by chemical explosions. Zixval zoomed in on a fallen shield generator. Look at the impact pattern. The projectiles weren't penetrating the shields. Then how? They were passing through harmonically. Zixval highlighted a modified human rifle recovered from the scene. They've adjusted their weapons to oscillate at precisely the resonant frequency of our shield matrices. The science officer's color membranes paled. But that would require intimate knowledge of the field equations, knowledge that took our species 12 generations to develop. Zixval had been asking to investigate human scientific capabilities for years. Now, with shield technology compromised, the Council finally authorized his mission. 3 days later, his team breached an underground facility beneath the ruins of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. What they found defied hegemony understanding. The central chamber housed a disassembled hegemony cruiser engine surrounded by equations scrawled on every available surface. Walls, floors, even ceilings. Human scientists moved between workstations, arguing intensely over components extracted from alien technology. At the center of this organized chaos sat Dr. Eliza Morrow. Her lower body ended at mid-thigh, the legacy of the initial bombardment. In place of legs, she used a hovering chair cobbled together from hegemony anti-gravity components and human mechanical parts, a physical embodiment of the technological hybridization taking place around her. When hegemony soldiers burst in, few humans reached for weapons. Instead, many grabbed data storage devices, destroying some, concealing others. Their priority wasn't survival, it was preserving knowledge. Dr. Morrow didn't even look up from her equations as neural restraints were applied to her. Fascinating approach to quantum field manipulation, she remarked, studying Zixval's restraint generator with professional interest. Your people built beautiful technology. Her eyes, magnified by work goggles, fixed on the commander. But you stopped asking why it worked centuries ago. In the temporary holding facility, Zixval conducted the interrogation himself. How did you determine the resonant frequencies of our shield systems? He asked. Morrow smiled with unexpected warmth. We observed. We tested. We failed repeatedly until we succeeded. Your species' technical manuals are written for users, not investigators. You know how to operate your technology perfectly, but many of you no longer understand the principles behind it. That's absurd, Zixval countered. Our scientific tradition spans millennia. Exactly, Morrow replied. You've had peace too long. Innovation requires necessity. We have nothing but necessity. She gestured to the neural restraints. For instance, these operate by inducing specific patterns in our central nervous system to inhibit motor function. But the pattern generators have a cyclic variance of 0.47 seconds. Zixval felt a chill. That specification wasn't even in the technical documentation. 3 weeks later, Dr. Morrow escaped using a modified neural restraint that shouldn't have been possible to alter. The alarm system registered the failure precisely 0.47 seconds too late to prevent her departure. The true crisis came 1 month after her escape, when human fighters appeared piloting hybrid craft. Hegemony engines attached to human-designed fuselages, operating with efficiency that matched or exceeded alien standards. Recovered wreckage revealed the most disturbing truth. The humans weren't just copying hegemony technology. They were improving it. A hegemony scientist named Ithvena defected the following week, bringing data cores and a warning that shook the council to its foundation. They've compressed our 1,000 years of development into a decade, she reported, her voice trembling. And they're doing it with equipment built from our garbage. What terrifies me most isn't their ingenuity, it's their collaboration. They share everything they learn instantly across their resistance network. Zixval added her testimony to his increasingly urgent reports. The hegemony's technological advantage is not merely declining, he concluded. It is being systematically dismantled and turned against us. We are no longer fighting the primitive humans we attacked. We are fighting something new, something that learns at an exponential rate. 15 years into the occupation, the Hegemony High Command authorized Operation Decapitation, their most ambitious effort to end the increasingly costly human resistance. After months of signals intelligence and orbital surveillance, they believed they had finally located the central command facility of the United Human Coalition. The bunker complex lay beneath the Rocky Mountains, heavily shielded against scanning technology. The Hegemony deployed their elite Shadowclaw commando units, genetically enhanced soldiers with chainalionic skin who specialized in infiltration and assassination. The mission: eliminate the coalition leadership in one decisive strike. Fleet Admiral Dravkor watched from orbit as the strike team breached the facility's outer perimeter. Their neural implants transmitted real-time footage back to the command ship. Minimal resistance, reported Strike Commander Hishvar. Proceeding to Central Chamber. The team moved through eerily empty corridors. No guards challenged them. No alarms sounded. Something isn't right, murmured Commander Zixval, who had been summoned to observe the operation. A facility of this importance would be heavily defended. Admiral Dravkor dismissed his concern with a wave of his armored claw. Their overconfidence is their undoing. We've monitored communications to this location for months. On screen, the strike team reached massive reinforced doors. Bypassing the security systems took precious minutes, but eventually, the doors slid open to reveal an empty room. No command center. No humans. Only a holographic message projected on the far wall. There is no center to strike. As the words registered, the facility's self-destruct sequence activated. Only 3 commandos escaped before the mountain collapsed upon itself. 2 days later, despite the operation's failure, coordinated attacks hit hegemony outposts across 6 continents. The coalition hadn't been crippled in the slightest. How? Demanded Admiral Dravkor during the emergency council session. How do they maintain perfect coordination without central command? It was Zixval who found the answer, buried in recovered human historical documents. He requested permission to interview a captured coalition officer, Major Sofia Rodriguez, taken during a skirmish in former Brazil. The major sat calmly across from him in the interrogation chamber, her posture relaxed despite the neural restraints. Unlike most prisoners, she showed no signs of fear or defiance, only patience. "Your command structure," Zixval began, "it defies our understanding. Without centralized leadership, how do you maintain tactical cohesion across global operations?" Rodriguez studied him with curious eyes. "You're the archivist, aren't you? The one who warned against attacking Earth." Zixval felt an uncomfortable ripple across his memory glands. "How could you know that?" She smiled slightly. "We make it our business to know our enemy, especially those few among you who showed wisdom." "You didn't answer my question." "Actually, I did. We know our enemy, but more importantly, we know ourselves." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Admiral Marcus Okafor. He was a historian before the war, designed our command structure based on historical resistance movements. We don't need constant orders because we all know the mission. Make you regret ever learning humans exist." Zixval reviewed the data again after the interview. Coalition forces demonstrated coordination that should have been impossible without constant communication. When the hegemony jammed transmission frequencies, resistance cells adapted immediately. When they captured human commanders, new leaders emerged seamlessly. The answer finally came from studying Admiral Okafor's pre-war academic papers on insurgency tactics. Humans weren't fighting with traditional military hierarchy. They operated on a principle called commander's intent, mission-focused direction that emphasized objective over method. Every resistance fighter understood the strategic goals so completely that they could operate autonomously while still contributing to the larger campaign. The hegemony's hierarchical military could not comprehend fighting an enemy with no clear command chain to disrupt. Their frustration peaked when 3 planet cracker weapons, city-sized antimatter bombs, were deployed against human strongholds in Australia, North America, and Eastern Europe. The High Command expected the devastating display of force to finally break human resolve. Instead, the attacks triggered coordinated offensives across all occupied territories. Coalition forces struck hegemony supply lines, communication centers, and command outposts with savage precision, as if they had been waiting for this escalation. In his private quarters, Zixval reviewed the attack patterns, a terrible realization dawning. "They wanted us to use our worst weapons first," he whispered to the empty room. "Now they know exactly what we're capable of, and they've made us exhaust our most powerful deterrents." For the first time, the archivist began to seriously consider a possibility that had seemed unthinkable when the war began. The hegemony might lose. 2 decades into a war they expected to last weeks, the hegemony faced an unexpected front: their own homeworlds. Commander Zixval stood in the council chamber as reports streamed in from across 7 planets. Protests in urban centers, younger generations questioning military narratives, public forums demanding uncensored information about the Earth conflict. "This sedition must be crushed immediately," insisted General Cravmore, his scales flushed dark with anger. "Increase penalties for spreading dissident material." "The penalties already include genetic lineage termination," noted Counselor Ethvera of the Diplomatic Corps. Yet the unrest grows. A junior communications officer interrupted with an urgent message. "Counselors, it's happening again. All channels." Throughout the chamber, display screens flickered. The official broadcast, a victory celebration marking the destruction of a human stronghold, dissolved into something entirely different. Crystal-clear footage showed Earth before the attack. Verdant parks in Tokyo, children playing in Rio de Janeiro, scientists at work in Nairobi. The images dissolved to the aftermath. The same locations cratered and burning. Then came something new. Recent footage of human resistance fighters treating wounded hegemony soldiers according to strict protocols that ensured their survival. A human female appeared on screen. Unlike the hardened soldiers they typically saw in combat footage, she wore civilian clothes. Those familiar with pre-war human culture might have recognized her as Maya Desai, once a renowned documentary filmmaker. "People of the hegemony," she began, her voice translated perfectly into all 7 hegemony languages. Your leadership tells you we are savage primitives who must be controlled. Judge for yourselves. The broadcast showed side-by-side comparisons. Hegemony orbital bombardment of civilian areas versus coalition precision strikes against military targets. We fight not because we love violence, she continued, but because you left us no choice. The transmission ended with what had become its signature closing. Human children in underground schools, learning both hegemony languages and advanced physics. The caption read, "We are making sure our children remember what you did and know how to prevent it from ever happening again." General Cravmore slammed his fist into the communications panel, shattering it. How? How do they penetrate our secure networks? Every encryption protocol has been updated. Commander Zix Val studied the transmission data. They're not hacking our current protocols, he realized. They compromised the communication hardware itself. Every device manufactured in the past 5 years contains embedded access points. Silence fell across the chamber as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just mastered hegemony technology. They'd subverted the supply chain itself. Later that night, Zixval received a private transmission in his quarters. When he cautiously accepted it, Maya Desai's face appeared on his screen. "Commander Zixval," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Your efforts to prevent the initial attack on Earth are documented in our archives." He stiffened. "How did you access this channel?" "It's reserved for archivist priority communications. We want your people to see us as we really are," she continued, ignoring his question. "We fight not because we love violence, but because you left us no choice. Remember this." Before he could respond, she added something unexpected. "When this war ends, and it will end, the galaxy will need bridge builders, truth keepers." A pause. "Archivists." The transmission ended, leaving Zixval profoundly disturbed. This wasn't just psychological warfare against hegemony citizens. This was targeted recruitment of specific officials, those whose records suggested they had opposed the war. The following day, protests erupted on 3 hegemony homeworlds after security forces attempted to confiscate communication devices en masse. On Zixval's home planet of Archivos, university students marched peacefully, carrying signs with a phrase that chilled the council: "Remember Earth." The psychological operation had achieved its objective, shattering the hegemony's internal cohesion. Citizens no longer trusted their leadership's narrative. Young hegemony members raised questions their hierarchical society had never tolerated. And most concerning to the military command, recruitment rates had fallen to historic lows. "They're not just fighting us with weapons," Zixval reported to the increasingly fractured council. "They're fighting with truth. And truth, once witnessed, cannot be unwound." In his private journal that night, he added an observation he dared not share publicly. "The humans have accomplished something unprecedented. They've made us question not just our military strategy, but our civilizational choices. They have turned our own history against us, and they've done it without firing a single shot at our homeworlds." 25 years after the devastation of Earth, the hegemony orbital monitors around Terra detected an anomaly at the edge of the system. The agricultural hub world, responsible for feeding nearly 30% of hegemony space, had always been lightly defended. Its distance from the front lines made it seem an unlikely target. That assumption shattered as the anomaly resolved into a fleet of over 200 ships, vessels unlike anything in hegemony records. Their hulls combined the organic curves of human design with the crystalline precision of hegemony technology. Hybrid creations that moved with disturbing grace through the defensive lines, jamming communications even as they broadcast a single message on all frequencies. "We are targeting military installations only. Civilians remain in designated safety zones." On the command deck of the flagship *Remembrance*, Admiral Lin Chen studied the holographic display of Terra's orbital defenses. The daughter of Colonel Sarah Chen had never seen Earth before its destruction. She had been born in an underground resistance bunker 3 years after the initial attack. Yet the planet's pre-war image was projected on her personal screen, a constant reminder of what had been lost and what they fought to avenge. "Defense grid neutralized," reported her tactical officer. "Civilian evacuation corridors established." "Casualties?" Chen asked. "Minimal. Most hegemony military personnel surrendered once their communications were cut." Chen nodded. "Begin Phase 2. Below on Atera's surface, the population had prepared for extinction. They had seen the human ships arrive and assumed they would soon experience the same devastation humans had suffered. Instead, precisely targeted strikes disabled military installations while avoiding population centers. Even more bewildering, human dropships landed outside major cities and deployed not just soldiers, but medical personnel who established treatment centers for both their own wounded and injured hegemony civilians. Fleet Commander Jax Moore, captured when his headquarters was surrounded, found himself in a clean holding facility rather than facing summary execution. When Admiral Chen arrived to interview high-ranking prisoners, he could not contain his confusion. "Why?" he demanded. "Why show restraint after what we did to your world?" Chen studied him silently before activating a holographic projector on her wrist. It displayed Earth's cities before the attack, then the smoking ruins after the bombardment. The hegemony officer flinched at the images. "Because if we destroy you completely," she explained, her voice calm but firm, "no one remains to remember why this happened. Your children need to understand the price of striking humans." She deactivated the projector. "The coalition does not target civilians. We do not bomb population centers. We do not slaughter the defenseless." "Then what do you want?" asked Jax Moore. "For now, your unconditional surrender. For the future, your eternal memory." Chen turned to leave before adding, "3 more fleets are approaching hegemony core worlds as we speak. You have 30 hours to broadcast your surrender, or we will disable your remaining military assets with precision strikes." As news of Atera's fall spread throughout hegemony space, their military leadership faced an uncomfortable revelation. Humans weren't fighting like the hegemony. They weren't even fighting for vengeance as expected. They fought with a strange combination of implacable determination and self-imposed restraint that made no sense to species raised on military conquest. In the council chambers, now relocated to a bunker on the hegemony throne world, Commander Zix Val delivered his assessment to the remaining leadership. "Admiral Chen's strategy reveals their true objective," he explained. "They're not fighting to annihilate us. They're fighting to transform us." General Krav Moore, one of the few original council members still alive, growled in frustration. "Transform us into what?" "Into something that will never again make the mistake of attacking humans," Zix Val replied. "They don't want our extinction. They want our education." As reports arrived of human fleets approaching 3 more hegemony worlds, the council faced a stark reality. Humans weren't fighting for vengeance or territory. They were fighting for a future where their enemy would live with the consequences of their actions and never forget the lesson they had learned at such terrible cost. The remnants of the Hegemony Council arrived at the orbital conference station 30 years after their initial attack on Earth. Once proud representatives of 7 advanced species now walked with the cautious deference of the defeated. Their fleet, once the terror of 3 spiral arms, had been systematically disabled by human precision strikes. Their military, once considered invincible, had been outmaneuvered by human tactical innovations. Their technology, once their greatest pride, had been reverse-engineered and improved upon by human scientists. Commander Zix Val, now one of the highest-ranking hegemony officials still alive, led the delegation. Age had withered his form, but his mind remained sharp, perhaps the only one among the leadership who truly understood what they faced. The human delegation was led by Coalition President Amara Osi, formerly a professor of international law before the war. Unlike her hegemony counterparts, she wore no military insignia, no ceremonial armor, only a simple dark suit with a small pin bearing Earth's image as it had once been. "We expected you years ago," she said as they settled at the conference table. There was no mockery in her tone, only a simple statement of fact. Many believed surrender was worse than extinction, admitted Zixval. They have since been persuaded otherwise by their own people. President OC nodded. The human psychological campaign had ultimately proven as effective as their military one, sparking internal revolutions across multiple hegemony worlds. We are prepared to discuss territorial concessions, Zixval continued, resource reparations, even public execution of war leadership if required. He spread his hands in a gesture of submission. What does Earth demand of us? President Osei activated a holographic display. Instead of showing territorial maps or resource calculations, it displayed a document titled The Concordat of Memory. The United Human Coalition requires 3 things, she stated, each article illuminating as she spoke. First, the establishment of permanent historical archives on every hegemony world, documenting this war in complete detail, from your initial discovery of Earth through your attack and the consequences that followed. The hegemony representatives shifted uncomfortably. Second, mandatory education about human hegemony history for all future generations, with joint oversight committees to ensure accuracy. General Crathmore, once the fiercest advocate for Earth's destruction, now a hollow shadow of his former self, hissed in disbelief. You would shame us before our children for eternity. Third, Osei continued without acknowledging the interruption, the establishment of an annual Remembrance Day, observed throughout former hegemony space. On this day, all activities will cease for 1 hour, while the complete record of Earth's destruction is broadcast to every citizen. Silence fell across the chamber. The hegemony delegation had prepared for territorial demands, for resource extraction, for punishment of their leadership. They had not prepared for this. Your species will commemorate the day you attacked Earth long after everyone in this room is dead, Osei explained, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. Not as punishment, but as inoculation against such catastrophic error. This is unprecedented, protested one of the hegemony diplomats. You would have us relive our shame forever. Osei's expression remained calm, but her eyes hardened. Your shame comes from your actions, not our memory of them. She activated another display, showing something unexpected. Human construction crews already rebuilding damaged infrastructure on recently liberated hegemony worlds. We don't want your territory or your wealth, she said quietly. We want your understanding. The hegemony negotiators conferred urgently among themselves. Finally, Zixval raised a hand for silence. What guarantees do we have that, once we accept these terms and educate our young about our error, you won't simply destroy us anyway? He asked. President OC gestured toward the viewport. Outside, a massive ship drifted into view, the first of a new class of vessels. Its hull bore the name *Concordat*. Because destroying you teaches nothing, she said simply. Your continued existence, changed by this experience, ensures this never happens again. Not to us. Not to anyone. She extended a document stylus. The choice, Commander, is whether your civilization wishes to evolve or to end. Zixval, last surviving member of the original Invasion Council, took the stylus with trembling fingers. Before signing, he spoke words that would eventually be inscribed at the entrance of every memorial archive across former hegemony space. We will remember, he promised, his voice breaking. Every generation will know what happens when you strike humans. 100 years after Earth's darkest day, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The human hegemony Concordat had evolved into the Galactic Confederation, with Earth rebuilt through combined human ingenuity and alien technology, serving as its diplomatic and cultural center. The scars remained, visible in the memorial parks that preserved sections of ruined cities as eternal reminders, but new growth had risen around them. Ambassador Zixval, great-grandson of the commander who had once warned against attacking humans, stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic reception center. Unlike his ancestor, he had never known the old hegemony. He had been raised with the Concordet's education system, learning the complete history of the war alongside human classmates. His genetic lineage had been among the first to embrace the new reality, perhaps why he had risen to become the Confederation's senior diplomat. A communication chime interrupted his thoughts. "Ambassador, the Vorac's delegation has arrived." The Vorac's were the first newly spacefaring species discovered since the formation of the Confederation. Initial reconnaissance had revealed concerning signs: aggressive expansion, militaristic culture, and territorial ambitions. Their ships had probed Confederation borders, testing defenses. Rather than respond militarily, the Confederation had extended an invitation to Earth. The Vorac's war primate, a hulking figure with iridescent scales and predatory eyes, led his delegation with barely concealed disdain. His species evolved from apex predators, and their language contained 14 different words for conquest. "Before we begin formal negotiations," Ambassador Zix-Val explained, "we have a tradition of sharing history." The war primate flicked his tail impatiently. "We came to assess your territory and strength, not listen to stories." Nevertheless, Zix-Val replied with the serene confidence that characterized modern hegemony diplomats, "This particular story may prove relevant to your assessment." He led them to the Memorial of the Fallen, a breathtaking monument where quantum projections showed the face of every human who died in the hegemony war, cycling endlessly. The space fell silent except for the soft whisper of names, a continuous recitation that had not paused in 70 years. "What is this place?" asked the Vorac's second in command, a female whose military decorations suggested she had won significant victories. "This is memory," Zix-Val answered simply. "Every face you see belonged to someone who died when my ancestors' people attacked Earth without provocation." The war primate studied the endless parade of faces with new interest. "Your people were defeated by these humans." "Not merely defeated," Zix-Val corrected. "Transformed." He gestured toward a nearby group. Hegemony and human children engaged in an educational project, working together with the easy familiarity of species who had grown up alongside each other. "When my people controlled the technology to destroy Earth completely, they chose bombardment instead, believing partial destruction would break human will while preserving resources." Zix-Val's voice carried the weight of historical understanding. "When humans gained the technology to annihilate the hegemony, they chose precision strikes against military targets only. They defeated us, then helped us rebuild." The war primate's eyes narrowed. "Why? Sentiment is weakness. Because this outcome, transformation rather than destruction, is more powerful than any victory through force," Zix-Val explained. "Look around you. Every Confederation species maintains memorials like this, not because humans demanded it, but because we recognize the wisdom in remembering." They continued walking, passing through halls that documented the entire conflict, from first contact through the final peace. At the exit, Zix-Val presented the war primate with a small crystal. "This contains complete, unaltered historical records of the human hegemony war," he explained. "We offer it freely to any species we encounter." The Vorac's leader accepted it reflexively, his expression contemplative. "Your species fought this war. Why would a hegemony descendant warn us against attacking humans?" Zix-Val's smile carried a hint of his ancestors' wisdom. "Because the greatest lesson of the war wasn't that humans are dangerous when attacked, though they certainly are. The lesson was that after victory, they offered us something better than what we had before. That is their true strength." 1 month later, the Confederation received formal notification that the Vorac's had established their own memorial archive. Within a cycle, a new saying spread throughout Vorac space, repeated with the reverence of ancient wisdom. "Strike humans, and you'll regret it forever. They ensure even your children's children will remember your mistake." The Vorac's delegation returned to sign a non-aggression pact, their warships repurposed as exploration vessels. As the ceremony concluded, human and hegemony diplomats exchanged knowing glances, former enemies now united in preventing history's repetition. The warning continued to echo through the stars, not as a threat, but as the most profound form of peace, the kind built on understanding rather than fear.